So in our last few projects, you've probably noticed we've been building a ton of cabinets. And because of that, we thought, what a better time than to do some cabinet tips for the peoples. Let's go. If you guys notice the way I build my cabinets, I'm typically getting stuff put together as fast and efficient as possible. And that's what's important to me when it comes to carcass construction. So tip number one is going to be pin your boxes together before using your final fasteners. It lets you erect the carcass before you actually have to go ahead and start screwing stuff in. So you're not having a single piece with something clamped onto it, sticking up in the air and another piece coming off and have this really difficult to manage box. You just stand that thing up, pin, then come back and run all of your screws after. Bonus tip for the same kind of construction is if you're not gonna see the outside of your box, just go ahead and countersink and run all your screws on the external edges. Trust me, saves you a ton of time not having to cut pocket holes. Tip number two also deals with cabinet carcasses, and we actually sniped this tip from Nick and his team over at NS Builders. And it's called using skidders. If you're moving around cabinet boxes, you wanna be able to shimmy them around your shop easily. We have been nailing to the bottom of our lowers some scrap pieces of plywood, helps it slide around, and then the tops of your uppers. So therefore, you're not scratching, denting, dinging, nicking, or beating up your cabinet boxes at all, and they're super easy to move around. Tip number three, go old school on your cabinets and use biscuits to your advantage. We use biscuits for everything that we can. Face frame attachment to our carcasses. We use it for edge banding on the front of our shelving and pretty much anything that we need a thicker hardwood edge. Another bonus is that once you put the biscuits into your hardwood or your attached aspect, you can then just slide your biscuit joiner across the matching face, and you don't have to worry about making all the marks and holes and clamping it up and doing all this stuff. It just boom, slaps right on, is super fast and efficient. Bonus tip, if you don't want your biscuits falling out, glue them into your face frame or your hardwood edge banding or whatever you're using it for first. Let that set up for a little bit, and then your biscuits won't fall all over the place, and go ahead and attach it to whatever your plywood or whatever other piece you need to put it on. Tip number four is another tip when it comes to being efficient with your carcass building. If you're gonna be edge banding something, do it before assembly. Unless you have dados or integral joinery and construction, if you get all of the edge banding done first, it's always gonna look better, it's always gonna be more clean, it's always gonna be more easy to manage. It's much easier to take a single sheet, stand it up in your tail vise on your bench, route the edges flush, than it is to take an entire carcass, edge band it, tape it all down, make sure everything matches up perfectly and anywhere that you have cross members coming together, then route it, and then come in all the inside corners with a chisel. Trust me on this one. If you can, edge band it first. Tip number five is also with the carcass construction. If you're gonna cut your toe kicks into your parts, batch those suckers out. We like to either use the double-sided tape trick or clamp all of our panels together and then cut our toe kicks at one time. Whatever method you like. I use a jigsaw most of the time. A lot of guys like the bandsaw. Sam even busted out the circular saw with some guides to do his last one. But if you cut them all at the same time and have any imperfections or they're not absolutely perfect, at least it's gonna match across all the panels that are going into that single cabinet. So batch your toe kicks. Before we continue on to that next killer tip I know you're dying for, I want to take a second to thank Skillshare for making this video possible. Our friends over at Skillshare love giving yins the opportunity to learn, so we love Skillshare. If you're not familiar, Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes for the creative and curious persons like myself and most of the team here. Now, I don't like being average at literally anything. If you ask anyone that knows me, they know that. So I'm constantly trying to learn any type of skill that I want to develop. And Skillshare has helped me immensely in this, specifically running my business, learning to be a better creative, and learning the back end of the computer stuff. One place that I'm working on improving right now is my personal skills when it comes to developing storytelling. So I'm loving the powerful storytelling course with Soledad O'Brien. She is an unbelievable teacher and the course has been amazing. But if you're not into that kind of thing, they've got classes on drawing, on illustration, on graphic design, web development, and even interior design. Any of the first 1,000 people to use the link down in the description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium. And then after the trial's up, it literally only costs about $10 a month and it is well worth it. Thank you again, Skillshare, for supporting this video, and I highly suggest you guys go check it out. Now, on to that next tip. Tip number 6. Now this is gonna come to after you have your doors and your drawer fronts assembled. Instead of using spackle or instead of using wood filler, my tip is to use Bondo. Bondo is a much harder and a much easier to work substrate that we as a team have found works just so much better, and it dries way faster than any of those other products. If you put some Bondo in your cracks or any dings or holes or nicks, it dries, sand it down, super easy. The fact fact that it's red or a different color, and typically than the wood you're using, makes it easy to see. It's just a much easier and better product to use on anything that you're gonna be paint grade, filling gaps and cracks. Bonus tip, if you are going to be doing something like that, if you prime your piece first, then you can't miss it. It's so much easier to see. Tip number 7, this is when it comes to all of your hardwood parts for your cabinets. If you've got hardwood face frames or hardwood rails and stiles. This tip comes from Sam and his experience building kitchens and cabinets before he started to come work here. Instead of ripping all of your parts to final dimension on the table saw and then having to sand each interior face, go ahead and rip them a little bit heavy, 16th and 8th, whatever you feel comfortable with, and then plane them all down on edge. This will eliminate any saw marks or burn marks from your table saw and speed up the process. There's nothing worse than forgetting that you didn't sand your interiors on your doors and drawers and then seeing it after the fact and trying to fix it. Trust me, run them through the planer. It'll save you a bunch of time. Tip number 8 is gonna deal with drawers and door construction. Now, if you're using tongue and groove or cope and stick or anything that's gonna have rails and stiles, the tip is to leave your stiles long. It might seem simple, because it gives you some flexibility to make sure that your rails are actually square and then get your parts cut down to size. You might be shaving a little bit here and there, but it'll give you a nice, perfectly crisp and clean edge on the tops and bottoms of your doors and drawers, and it just makes it so much easier to get them fitted instead of having potentially things be off slightly in glue up because you cut everything final dimensions first. Tip number 9, this is something I learned early on learning how to build cabinets, and that's gonna be to pre-finish all of your interior panels. Now, a lot of people will say if you're using plywood or MDF or some man-made substrate that you don't need to do this because they don't move. But in reality, everything literally moves. It's just gonna be a lot less. So we go ahead and finish all of the edges of our interior panels in any type of finished work that we're doing, just to make sure that as things expand and contract, you don't get that awful looking either different color or unfinished line on the insides of your doors and drawers. Tip number 10 deals with fitting your doors and drawers inset to a face frame. The tip is build your face frame and then fit your doors and drawers. Don't do it when it's on the carcass. If you do it when it's laying flat, you can cut spacers and it's just so much easier to work with. So I'm gonna make sure these are as even as I can get them. Label your work properly and take your time on this part, and it'll save you a ton of headaches once you get your carcass and cabinets put together. Trust me, I've made that mistake for years. And that's gonna be a wrap on this set of tips. If you wanna see more tips and tricks and all of that goodness, I got a whole playlist for you right here. Check it out.